We will call this meeting to order. Regular city council meeting, city of Dalhart, Monday, November 13th, 2023. First item on the agenda is the prayer. Frankie, could you lead us in prayer, please?
Let's pray. Father God, as we come before you this evening, Lord, first, we thank you, we praise you, Lord, for all the blessings that we've received as individuals, as families, as a city, as a country, Lord, and we praise you and thank you for that. When we pause and think about the blessings you bestow upon us. As we pray this evening, Lord, we lift before you that the decisions that we make, Lord, that we make them according to the need and the good of the public of Dalhart, Lord, and we praise that we take the time and look, search, Lord, for the right decisions to be made, knowing, Lord, that we seek to be intimate with you, seeking your face, and we'll make decisions, Lord, on your behalf that you will praise and that you will bless. We just pray that you bless everybody that's here this evening and praising you and thanking you, Lord, for the greatest blessing ever given to mankind was your salvation of sacrifice that you made for our salvation upon that cross. For it's in your precious holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please stand with me as we recite the pledge of the United States and Texas flags.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
First item on the agenda is a consent agenda consisting of minutes from October 23rd, 2023, regular meeting minutes, and minutes from the October 30th, 2023 special meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number one, public comments. Jerry?
Just real quickly, wanted to say that one of the items on your agenda tonight is the comprehensive plan. And that was one of the things while I was on council that I was pretty passionate about. And they're going to give you an update and where we're at and things on setting that comprehensive plan up. I also wanted to state that some of the public is like surveys and things like that, that's your way of getting what you're wanting our community to be in the future. This comprehensive plan will give us a plan for some capital improvements that are needed and some park improvements and just in general gives us a plan to move forward. So I just wanted to make that statement that it's a good thing that we're headed in that direction. So thank you.
Sharon. Number two, conduct the third reading of ordinance 2023-06.
Make the motion, we open third reading.
Second by Ginger. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Should be.
Can I get a motion to close the third reading? Ordinance 2023-06.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Item number three, the presentation of the city of Dalhart's comprehensive plan.
We have to adopt the one.
Oh, we need to adopt
For number two.
number two.
Make a motion, we adopt ordinance 2023-06.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Item number three, fraternity presentation on the city of Dalhart's comprehensive plan.
Hey, they should be joining us here in a little bit with Zoom. But just to introduce her while she comes on, her name is AJ Fiver. She is from Verdinity, which is the company that we have contracted to do our comprehensive plan. We are through with stage one, have just now moved into stage two, and that's why she's going to give us an update. She's got quite a bit of information. Some of it was on the surveys, her visit. She came and visited, spent 3 days here. I think several of you came and went to the meeting that we had at the college where, they did their workshop and so forth. So while they're doing that, do you have any questions real quick about anything before she jumps on if you want?
Might be a question for her, but can you tell us what kind of feedback we got from the community on that survey?
Yeah, I could. I mean, I can get it to you if you want. I don't have the numbers right offhand. We got 397 replies.
Okay.
You're really pushing that 400, didn't quite get it, but that's well above, for a community our size, that's well above our average
Great.
of what they were expecting us to get. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so there you go, AJ. If you can hear us, I'll turn it over to you.
I can, and hopefully you can see and hear me. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to share my screen to pull up the slide deck.
I think it was in everybody. In Dropbox. It's should be
Yeah.
in,
It's in Dropbox.
yeah. Okay. It's on yours and Bruno's, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think everybody's got it in their Dropbox. You're still there.
Okay, if you prefer to just flip through it, I can certainly present it that way as well. Is that what we like to do?
He's working on it so we can get started.
Oh,
So we can keep
okay.
our meeting. It's a long meeting, so.
Got it. I can't see all of you either, so it's
Give us just
verbal
a
is
few
going to
minutes.
help. Sure.
Can you try it now, ma'am?
Yes, I sure can. Okay, are you able to see that?
Not yet.
Hmm. Well, usually this is pretty simple.
There we
Okay,
go.
how about now?
We
Okay,
got it now.
great. Wonderful. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to give you an overview of some of the things that we've heard throughout this process, just to give you an update so you're aware of what's happening with the community as we go through this. We'll start with talking through several different pieces of information about the project timeline. That's usually the first place to start. Just to remind you of that, I know you've seen that, but it's been some time. We'll also go over very briefly the first trip that we had to your community and the survey that you just mentioned, as well as some key takeaways and where we're going next. So with that, I'll draw the project timeline up here for you and just draw your attention to a few short things. We are still looking through some elements that we've collected in phase one, although we have completed the first phase of the project. And we have moved into phase two, which we'll be working within until February of next year. Phase two is really focused on doing a series of some workshops that we have already completed, but we will be continuing to gather input, and we will be putting together our land use fiscal analysis, which is a big component of the way that we approach comprehensive planning and really all planning that we do with our company, Virginity. We like to utilize that tool to allow the communities to understand how key development patterns and decisions that they make translate into an output that comes in the form of property tax revenues, identify what patterns are the most productive, and then talk throughout the remainder of the plan on how to maximize those. So it's very much about pulling together what's best for the community, what the community wants and needs to see, but also with a fiscal sensibility and a focus on resource stewardship. From there, we'll move into the third phase, which will take us into the beginning of the summer, where we will start in earnest on drafting elements of the plan, the future land use map component, some mobility elements and growth scenarios. Phase 4 will take us into next fall. And this is where we really get down to brass tacks and start talking about not just the whys, but the hows of how to execute all of these different things that we've collected throughout this point in the planning process. We will continue working with your comprehensive plan advisory committee throughout all of these phases, culminating in a draft plan that will be provided to the city for its review at the end of phase 4. And then moving into phase 5 is when we really look at the adoption process, working with you all and other key boards and commissions, namely the advisory committee that I just mentioned, and maybe also some others like the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that is our path forward. And just as a reminder and refresher for you, we offer that up. So I know that you are primarily interested this evening in hearing some of the feedback that we've gotten throughout this process. And I think Joe did a nice job of sort of queuing up this presentation. So we're going to start with talking about the public open house. This was an event that we did working in tandem with your staff. We had that on the evening of Tuesday, August 8th. That coincided with our first trip to the community, which was really based on a lot of fact finding, kind of touring the community, gathering our initial impressions, identifying problems and opportunities. And at this time, community members were asked to come and give us feedback. We know that we had around 40 people in attendance. And one of the things that we asked the community members to do at this public open house was to prioritize elements within Dalhart. What were the things that we really needed to focus on? Where did they really feel that help and assistance was needed for the future? And so those top 3 pieces that they chose were housing. And of course, under the umbrella of housing, that included not only the availability of housing, but also the affordability of housing. And in some instances, we also had people talk about the condition of housing within the community. The second priority that they selected was jobs and businesses, really trying to grow the community through offering jobs that bring people to Dalhart, support of businesses, both local and large businesses, and also an element of economic development. And then thirdly, streets and services, making sure that the conditions of the infrastructure there in place is maintained at a high level, that service delivery is efficient and effective. Lots of good feedback on all 3 of those items. We also, at a different station, asked community members to look at some different principles that officials often use throughout all of the different cities that we've worked with to make their decisions. And we asked community members to rank those. And these were the top 3 that they ranked at this particular time. Number 1 was quality of life, and quality of life does mean different things to different people. But in the conversations that we had with your community members, quality of life involved namely quality of life for children and teenagers, a quality of life that retains people in the community, quality of life translating to things like availability of resources, finding a place to live, back to that housing component. So quality of life is a pretty broad umbrella. We will be drilling that down more in the plan. So don't worry, we're not going to just leave you with a plan that says, hey, increase and enhance quality of life. We're going to talk about specifics about how that can be done. The second principle that they felt was something they wanted to see applied as decisions are made on their behalf is the sense of open and transparent governance. And so that translated generally to specific comments about knowing what's happening. Community members want to know what's happening with local government. They want to know what decisions are being made. And to the transparency element, they want to understand how decisions are being made. Unfortunately, part of this planning process is identifying some ways, some key guiding questions and components, and of course, these principles to help guide you in your decision making after adoption when you begin the plan implementation process. And then the third highest priority and principle that people said they wanted to see factored into decision making was fiscal responsibility. As I've already alluded to, some of the tools that we've put together and will be putting within the plan draft for you to review help you do that, provide you with information that you haven't had to date as it relates to development patterns and the use of the land resource that you have there in Dalhart. Fiscal responsibility, of course, also translates to the stewardship of budgeting dollars, which I'm sure you are all already very familiar with, and it sounds like is a key piece of the decisions and the discussions that you're already having. But we'll continue to explore that more throughout the process to identify some, again, specific hows on how you can integrate this and continue to move forward. So the first survey that was distributed out through the community that Joe mentioned just a minute ago, we refer to as the Vibrant Community Assessment. This is an assessment tool that we use across all of our clients, and it stems from a book called Building a Vibrant Community by Quint Studer that really unpacks what are the key elements that very vibrant and successful communities have in common. And so this particular assessment asked your community members to rank the city of Dalhart across several different categories. So the rankings were from 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. The rankings that we received from your community members were between 2s and 3s and across all categories, which means that the community perceives Dalhart as sitting right in the middle. So there is room to improve, but it certainly isn't a very low response either. So there's something there that we can continue to build on and work with. One of the final questions that we close this assessment with is a question that asks people how committed they would be to pitching in and improving Dalhart. And the reason that we cue that question up at the very beginning, and we refer to it throughout this entire planning process, you'll hear us remind you of this, is because this comprehensive planning process and the implementation of the plan, once it's finalized, is not something that City Hall or City Council can execute all on their own. It really is a community-based plan. And especially in smaller communities where resources are constrained, the people and the talents and the expertise that you have there locally can be very powerful in helping you do more with less, which is the phrase that we always hear at local government levels. That is the challenge, truly, is always to do more with less. So when we asked your community how committed they would be to improving Dalhart and being part of that process, the ranking on the average was 8 out of 10, which tells us that you have a lot of people there locally that are excited about the future and would like to have a part to play in it. I will share with you from the experience that we've acquired over the last several years doing this in communities across the state of Texas and in other similar states. Generally, it comes down to that communities have more people than they even know that are willing and able and excited to help out in some way. They simply don't know where to start, who to contact, or what to do. So that's another thing that we'll explore throughout this planning process, is how you might be able to utilize the people that ranked their commitment on such a high scale for the city. We also asked them about their values. Values are extremely important in all communities, but in smaller communities, they tend to be even more important. And the alignment between values and decisions often helps community members feel that there's a higher presence of those things that we heard about a moment ago, this idea of transparency and openness. And so the respondents to the survey said that integrity, responsibility, service, and teamwork were their top 4 values that they'd like the city to operate within. We also had a couple of opportunities for people to write in responses. And most of the write-in responses related to things like retaining new businesses, attracting people, building up a workforce, and then back to that housing issue, the issue of availability and affordability. Another common item of feedback that we heard was that there were concerns that there wasn't enough for teenagers and young adults to do in Dalhart. And we heard several times over that there weren't enough daycares in Dalhart for parents to be supported by. So that was an interesting piece that we wanted to share. Other common topics were the attractiveness and the curb appeal of Dalhart. People felt very strongly that there was more that could be done in those regards. Some specific things were code enforcement related issues. So things like the conditions of buildings, the conditions of yards, residences, and streets, and then maintenance related items like streets and sidewalks. There was also a deliberate and intentional bit of feedback that we received where people said they'd really like to see revitalization of key corridors and within downtown to sort of increase the amount of activity and therefore the level of attractiveness that that conveys both to the locals and to people from out of town. We also heard some feedback that there is a perception that the migrant worker community is not necessarily emotionally invested in Dalhart. However, the community indicated that there was a need to be more inclusive and welcoming, and perhaps part of the issue lies within that community feeling integrated within Dalhart. So some needs and wants that we were able to extract from a combination of the survey, the 2-day trip that we spent in town, some of the interviews that we've put together and conducted, and our time with the city staff. I'm going to summarize here at a very high level in the interest of time. So we've already touched on housing, jobs and workforce continue to be a need, code enforcement in some of the ways that we just mentioned, education and support for city leadership and boards and commission members. So we did have some specific conversations, both individually and in a group with some people that have served or are serving currently. And so there's a real desire by these folks to have some additional support so that they feel they can do their best work on behalf of the city. Better communication and collaboration with the community. This is something we hear, I think, in every community that we work in. So, you know, there is always a continuum of these things, and there's always room to improve upon that. Infrastructure improvements, especially on the north side of the community, was a need that came to the top over and over again. And then some process and operational improvements with the city itself. Now, I do want to make a special note that although this was something that we heard was a need, it was always coupled with the comment that there has been improvement observed over the last couple of years. So people feel that things are moving in the right direction. They would just like to continue to see procedurally and operationally things continue to improve. So that's a really good note for us to have as well. Now, as far as wants go, there is a desire to sort of break reliance, if you will, on other cities that people are wholly reliant on, or at least partially reliant on for goods and services. So this idea of the more that we have available in Dalhart, the less we have to rely on other neighboring communities in the region. The revitalization of downtown and key corridors, I've already mentioned to you, and the support of existing businesses. There's a lot of really great work being done in Dalhart, and there are some very passionate people that are willing to not only verbally support the community, but are also doing it by creating businesses or operating businesses there within its city limits. And so continued support for those is something that is a desire. The bringing in of new industries is a big one. But at the same time, and this is sometimes very tricky, bring in new things and let's have some progress forward, but let's also preserve that small town feel and sense of community that the city of Dalhart and the people that live there enjoy so much. Another part of this was identifying ways to redevelop, or to attract new development in older parts of the city. So we also have been looking at a great deal of data and research that we've been doing on the community with the help of your city staff, the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee and our team. So there are a few key takeaways from the data that we also felt it important to share with you tonight. So one thing I'll mention is that when it comes to demographics, the ability to maintain map-based data or geographic-based data, and things of that nature, the city of Dalhart has historically not kept much data. Now, fortunately, you have a staff and you have a leadership team there, including all of you, that seem very interested in improving and collecting the amount and the quality of data that can be used in future years as a basis for decision making, as a basis for policy making, as a basis for making decisions that may have a budgetary component. So it seems that there's much agreement, widespread, that data is helpful. And so one of the things that we'll be doing is recommending key pieces of data to track and monitor that will be helpful for the community. When we work with communities of this size, we have to obviously take into account the city staff size and the resources that are available to the staff. So it's not necessarily about keeping data for data's sake and doing a lot of bean counting. It's about identifying what data will be most powerful and is within reach to be kept and maintained by city staff. So that's one thing we'll definitely be looking at making recommendations on. So your population per square mile has grown, and that growth has been modest, but yet it is growth. And so that's something that we always try to get a handle on when we first come into a community. Now, the estimates through the Census Bureau as of July of 2021 include a total population of just shy of 8,400 people, which is up from those census figures in mid-year 2020. Also of note, a quarter of the households in Dalhart are renters. Now, that is lower than the state percentage, which is closer to 35, 36%, but nonetheless, that is still a significant chunk of your population. And so that is a population or a subpopulation that we want to keep in mind when we have these discussions about housing. Your median age is also younger than the state average of 35. Your median age is 30. So that's also important for us to understand. You might remember me mentioning a few slides back that there were concerns raised through the community survey that there wasn't enough to do for people that are younger. And likewise, this reliance on shopping and services in other communities tends to also pull them out of the community as it relates to all three of those items. So cracking the code of how you can start to make those offerings here locally is going to be significant. We also utilize what we call tapestry segmentation, and this is a tool that is geographically based, and it takes a look at over 20 different types of populations and subpopulations in communities and tells us what subpopulations make up the majority of Dalhart. In Dalhart's case, the highest group is what is a category referred to as prairie living, just over 37% of Dalhart's population. And so the idea with this segmentation is to identify distinctive markets in the US. That helps us understand consumers and possible consumers in your area. So what is this prairie living category? Well, it's the most rural market. Across the US, it only comprises about 1% of households. But again, in Dalhart, it comprises just under 40%. So these are agriculturally based communities. They generally own single family dwellings. The median household income is similar to the US, but the labor force participation is usually higher than the US. This group of folks tends to buy things when they need them rather than when they want them. Things that are trendy are not necessarily as important to these folks. Many own a truck, a riding lawnmower, and ATVs. They like in-person opportunities to conduct business, and they are investors that are thinking long-term. They're also creatures of habit when it comes to certain subsections of the economy, especially as it relates to food items like groceries and also dining out. So those were some interesting tidbits of information. We always look at these pieces of information, but we don't rely on them solely because obviously the experience of working with your community and in your community gives us the best firsthand knowledge. But this is something that's somewhat interesting to note. As I mentioned with data, the collection of data and the geographic way of demonstrating and illustrating that data is really important when it comes to planning. And the first thing that might bring to mind is land use planning. And that, of course, is the first and foremost purpose of a comprehensive plan. But it also relates to other things like infrastructure, mobility, services, revitalization. So there are a few pieces of information that we have been able to work with your staff to obtain. And so we've put together a couple of maps based on that information. One of the first things that we've done is take a look at your infrastructure network that you have the ability to provide to us, because you, of course, know where your water, wastewater lines are, that sort of thing. We've done some additional work and study to try to add some additional meaning to that data. So what you see here on this map in the blue areas, these are parcels individually mapped throughout the city of Dalhart that are both served by infrastructure and are currently developed, meaning that they have a structure or more than one structure that is in place on those parcels. Likewise, the red areas are areas which are served by infrastructure but are currently undeveloped. So when we start thinking about infill development and we start thinking about how to incentivize additional development within your city limits, it's really important for us to understand where infrastructure that you've already bought and paid for and are already maintaining exists, but where land availability also exists. The nexus between those two things is really significant when you're trying to be the best steward of your resources. Likewise, the areas in yellow are not currently served and are also undeveloped. So we will be factoring these things into our recommendations for you all as it relates to both a future land use map and in terms of where to incentivize or encourage growth. So this map itself doesn't necessarily stand on its own and provide recommendations, but it is a key piece of what we'll be looking at. And so therefore something I wanted to share with you all. Another thing we've done is we've taken a look at your roadways around the city. We've mapped out ones that are unimproved, ones that are improved with brick, and ones that are improved with asphalt. Those things will factor into the fiscal analysis that we are currently in the process of wrapping up, and which will be presented to the city staff and also to the advisory committee as per the contract in the next couple of months. So how do we use this information? Well, we actually quantify the costs of maintenance for your street network, and we factor that into your property tax revenue generation. So I urge you to think of this as similar to a business. I'm not saying that running government is the same thing as running a business, but this analogy seems to help people pretty well. So if you were talking to a business owner and you asked them how well their business was doing and they told you how much revenue they made last year, you would know that that was only one part of the picture. If you wanted to know the entire picture about that business, it would be useful for you to know not only what they brought in, but also what their costs were so that you can understand their net profit. And so that's the process that we're working through here. We're looking at what you collect with property tax revenues. We're looking at what you're spending with your capital outlays and your city annual budget. And we can help you understand then how to best maximize that productivity. The last piece I want to share with you is the most recent work that we've been doing, which is a little bit of visioning work. And so we recently had a meeting with your comprehensive plan advisory committee in October. We did a virtual workshop with them where we identified as a group what the community's vision statement would be as a starting point. This is still very much in draft form, so I want to emphasize that this is not finalized. But because you are the city council, it makes sense to let you know where we are at this point in time. So I want to start just very briefly with what is a community vision, because this is not something that everyone is super familiar with. But these are really necessary for the city to represent the community best by understanding what matters to them. And in the context of a comprehensive plan, the vision statement is intended to be that statement that you utilize in all of your different decisions. And you're asking yourself as a group, does this decision essentially uphold the community vision, or does it work at cross purposes with it? If it's the latter, then some additional discussion might need to be held. There might be some additional research or data or information that you ask your staff for. If it's very clear that it is something that upholds the community's vision, then that helps your community with that desire for transparency and openness that we mentioned earlier, where they can see you deliberating openly about the decision and making sure it is something that fits nicely with the community vision. The vision statement's intended to represent what Dalhart wants to become. And so it really is the destination, is how I urge you to think about it. Whereas the comprehensive plan is the roadmap to get to that destination. So it's really important that it be clear, that it be actionable, and it be reflective of the collective aspirations of the community, which is tough to do, but it is certainly a worthwhile exercise. And I really have to commend your advisory committee. They did an outstanding job with this. So as I mentioned, we had our first of several virtual workshops with them on the 17th of October. And during this workshop, we walked together through this process of coming up with a vision, why a vision is important. We had a couple of exercises that we did as a group to get them thinking, to identify some commonalities, and then work together to put together a vision statement that, again, is just in a draft form. But as it currently stands, this is that drafted vision statement. Dalhart is a diverse community that merges its rich agricultural heritage with urban progress, fostering a prosperous and close-knit community rooted in a culture of giving back. We are dedicated to upholding our rural identity, cultivating economic opportunity, and creating a memorable community where people choose to live, thrive, and prosper. So as you can see, that's a really packed statement. The committee, as they worked through these exercises, had some very important things that they felt were key to sort of capture for posterity as it relates to Dalhart. That small town feel I mentioned earlier, that was also something that rose to the top of the surveys. That prosperous and close-knit community really exemplifies that. There were many people that said they really felt that it was important to highlight that people in Dalhart are focused on giving back to the community, and that people there are really willing to help one another. The rural identity kind of also harkens back to that kind of know where you came from, as well as knowing where you're going, which is this idea of economic opportunity and a memorable community. And those verbs that they chose were very specific. They want people to choose to live here. They want people to thrive as they live there and to prosper in all of the ways that that means. And that also harkens back to this notion of quality of life that we heard so consistently from your community members. So the advisory committee did an outstanding job of this. We've worked with lots of different communities and lots of different committees, and sometimes they struggle with this, but they felt very, well, I don't know how they felt, but the way that they conducted themselves implied that they felt very confident about knowing who and what Dalhart is, which is probably why you chose them to be on the committee. So what is coming up next? There are lots of things ahead, as I mentioned in that timeline. We still have a lot of this contract left ahead of us. So I won't go through everything that's ahead because we'd be here for quite a while. But at a very high level, I mentioned that survey that we gave you some summary of at the beginning closed on September 15th. We have provided a written and graphic report of that to the city staff. There is currently a second survey that's going to be running that's specific to business owners and helping us capture some information about the business perspective and the business culture there in Dalhart. And that's going to be opening later this week, and we'll run through the mid part of December, closing right before the holidays, to give us the ability before the end of the year to comb through all of those responses and gather those up and summarize them for you. And then the third survey will run between December into the January timeframe. We're still looking at the specific dates on that because, again, we want to maximize participation, and the holidays can be difficult for that. So we'll be fine-tuning those dates, but it will be focused on community identity and vision. So as I mentioned, the vision that we worked through with the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, or the CPAC, is still very much in a draft form. We also want to give people in the community the opportunity to give feedback as it relates to the identity and vision of Dalhart. And so we'll be doing that as well. So with that, I'll also mention to you briefly, it wasn't on the slide, but I will just remind you that we will be coming back to the city of Dalhart in person. I believe that's in June. And at that time, we will be going over a great deal of information that has been produced, including the future land use map and some of the drafted pieces that will ultimately go into the planning document. We have several different virtual contacts that we will have between now and then. And of course, we are meeting with your city staff on a regular basis to provide them with updates of what's been happening month to month, looking ahead, what deadlines are coming up, what deliverables are coming up, so that they can see that we are continuing to run on time and they know exactly what's on the horizon. And we've really had a great experience working with them so far. I mentioned we had also had some time with your city staff from a variety of departments, and we found them to be very passionate people that were very helpful in giving us their feedback. We were able to get a better understanding of the transitions that have occurred in Dalhart in recent years and the things that they're trying to do and implement in the meantime to keep it moving very smoothly and effectively. So I really appreciate the time of this group. I understand that you have a longer agenda, so I will wrap up, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have before we wrap up and you move on to your other items. So thank you so much.
Any questions? I think
Okay.
we're good. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Great. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
AJ.
And we look forward. I know we've gotten to meet some of you in person. We look forward to meeting all of you the next time that we're in town. So thank you again.
Thank you. Anything else, Joe?
That's it, unless you had something, I mean, she gave you a chance to answer a question, unless there's something you want me to try to answer.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, consider the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and conduct the second reading of ordinance 2023-13. The motion to open the second reading of 2023-13.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Abstain.
Any opposed? Can I get a motion to close the second reading of ordinance 2023-13?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Get a motion to adopt ordinance 2023-13.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Item number 5, consider the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to conduct the second reading of ordinance 2023-14.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Can I get a motion to close the second reading of 2023-14?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion to adopt ordinance 2023-14.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 6, consider the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Conduct the second reading of ordinance 2023-15. Need a motion to open the second reading?
Moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Can I get a motion to close the second reading of ordinance 2023-15?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Need a motion to adopt ordinance 2023-15?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 7, consider the recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission and conduct the first reading of ordinance 2023-16.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Would you like for me to go through each one of these?
That'd be great.
As we go? Okay, so the first one for the Watts family is going to be 105 Osceola. This one was going to be the last reading from rezone for manufactured home R3 into special use. The second one is going to be for J Gott. This is going to be FM 281 Highway 87 for retail sales of a truck service. Final reading on this one as well is it'll be switched from agriculture to commercial. Third one will be the last reading for the Fernandez family, 1420 Trinidad. This is going to be for the placement of a manufactured home for R3, converting it to special use for zone. And then the fourth one will be for Mr. Jeff Coate and Emilio Chavez, 1301 East First, manufactured home being set. It was an R3 zone. It'll be the first reading to be changed for special use. So
Could you explain, please, if I may, the special circumstances with that one, if the home is in place?
say that one more time, I'm sorry.
You have the home in place on
Yes.
08 First Street.
Yes, so that one was placed there before my arrival. When I first began, there was a few that we were able to stop before they were able to connect. This was one of them. Just they didn't know the process of planning and zoning, so we made sure that we had them follow the city ordinance on this part, so.
Yeah, so make the comment, they and code will, and that they have put restrictions on it in relationship to, you want to explain what I'm talking about, setting it up, occupancy and all of that. They can't do anything to it until,
So we've complete the first and second reading.
also in the packet, there is a copy of the lease, which would be implied that the property owner is taking responsibility. Is that the intent there is explained to him?
Yes.
So the permit would be for the house owner, but the responsibility through code still falls to the property owner. And he is signed up for it. Thank you.
Planning and zoning's on board with all of these, everything's.
Yes, all of them have been approved. They didn't have any issues or questions on some of them. There was one that did make it through, so we're gonna be working on that one for the most part to get it where it needs to be.
There was one on that we addressed on the first reading, that they did not have the driveways in place, and planning and zoning allowed them to put the exception on it, and we were informed of that. And it still has on the application that it wasn't there, but code department has taken care of it.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Thank you.
So
So we need a motion to close the first reading of 2023-16.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 8, consider an act upon adopting resolution 2023-17.
Evening, council. So earlier this year, Chief Hughes applied for a grant through the Office of the Governor to get body armor that increases our ballistic protection
We need
regarding when it comes, I'm sorry,
Make a motion to open.
my apologies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
My apologies.
No problem.
So like I said, Chief Hughes applied for this grant earlier this year to the Office of the Governor to get body armor and in order to increase our rifle ballistic protection for all the officers. All of the vests will be personally fitted to each individual officer. So it won't be one of those that's a mass manufacture thing or anything like that. They're specific for each officer. So each officer will be able to be protected to the utmost degree. These vests are at no cost to the city nor to the police department. They are fully funded by the Office of the Governor, but that office does require authorization from you folks in order to be able to finalize that grant.
You entertain the motion, I make a motion, we adopt resolution 23-17.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Oh, wait, next time.
Item number 9, discuss and or act upon request from the Dalhart Fire Department for community development funds.
Make a motion, we up the action for the request and volunteer fire department.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
So learn from him. Thank you, bro. Oh, you love, don't blame him. So yeah, come to you, we're looking at the Mercy Response Center. Really exciting to see that, get work started going over there. just let you inside the mind and some of the culture of our first responders. I mean, everybody's pretty excited about it, and there's a lot of energy going and for that thing, and really excited to see us going. What we're looking at is the 9/11 Never Forget memorial exhibit. And it is a part of the Tunnel to Towers organization or foundation, and it is a semi that transforms and folds open to a museum. And they travel the country, and it's a 9/11 museum. And a really neat thing, the truck comes with a crew with it, 2 to 4 personnel in the crew. And what we're looking at is be a 4-day visit, 1 for arrival, 3 for visitors to come. This would just be a great way for us to open this building. I mean, this is a huge historical thing happening in our community, mainly at the leadership of this council. And this would just be a great thing for not only for us first responders, but for our community. Hey, remember when this thing opened and in our opening day. It does cost $20,000 for the memorial exhibit. Plan on paying it in 3 separate payments throughout the next 3 years. And there will be a schedule already set in place for when the memorial is here. This will be set in place way ahead of time. Arriving in, so we're looking at opening of the Mercy Response Center in beginning of 25. And we would hold this event in March of 25. And the exhibit would arrive in town via an escort from our first responders on the 26th. And then we would begin our scheduled visits. Earlier in that school year, first semester, we'll pre-plan with the schools and schedule out for all the kids to have opportunities to come and see this. Which I think it's a huge deal. My little 8-year-old asked me what, hey, I asked him, what 9/11 is? And some planes blew up. And then sat and told him the whole story about it. And he asked, well, my older son's like, is that why Bubba's over there fighting? I was like, yeah, kind of, a little bit of it. So it's a huge opportunity for us to educate our youth, because we're getting farther and farther away from them. So our schools, that would be that first day. And I'm going to anticipate there's going to be some outreach in areas that are going to also want to come and visit this also. So we'll have to look at that. On Friday, we'll open up to the general public. And that may be where some of the overflow comes from the outreach areas. And then into Saturday, we'll have our grand opening for the new Emergency Response Center. And plan on we'll have a symposium speakers that day, a whole scheduled event. Plan on asking some of our local leaders, regional and state leaders to come and speak also during this event. Again, I just think this is going to be a really nice way for us to bookmark this historical building of this building. That's going to mean so much positive towards our community.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve the request for the volunteer fire department and 9/11 museum exhibit.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Mario. Think of a better way to showcase the accomplishment that we've got ahead of us. So I'm excited about that.
Probably is going to be a large community.
I can imagine. Excited. Item number 10, presentation of year in review. Fiscal year 2022-2023. Video by staff, Bryce Jones.
So this is a video that we put together. We closed the fiscal year 22-23 at the end of September. And so this is a video that shows all the departments' big achievements that they tackled during that fiscal year. So it's a short video. I know y'all are ripping through things right now. That on this. Sorry. Start over.
That's okay. I think we're good. We're.
Yeah.
Bryce could hum, but it'll be fine.
One year.
Yeah, so I can't answer questions about all the departments, if y'all have them, but, as you can see, all the departments had several big accomplishments this year, and that's what we wanted to highlight and promote, share with the community, and then share with y'all as well as, leaders in the community. If people ask what the city is doing and what we're accomplishing, this is what we can show for 22-23, and hopefully next year's video is longer.
Don't put that on the city website or anything.
We put it on the Facebook page. Yes, sir.
If I may, don't we have another incentive grant now?
We do, yeah. So we've done some things since then. But in fiscal year 23-24.
But it's still,
But yeah, we have added another incentive grant. Of course, fire hired first chief, so some big things still happening just at the start of this year.
Thank you, Bryce.
Yes, sir.
Bryce, I don't know if you want to stay. He's also doing the housing.
Oh, perfect. Item number 11, presentation of housing study by Dalhart EDC staff.
There's a PowerPoint that'll go with this one. And while he pulls that up, just some context on this housing study. When we talk with businesses in town and residents in town about the biggest challenges they're facing, number one that we always hear is housing. And I'm glad AJ with Verdinity presented before this, because as you heard when we held our event at Frank Phillips, we had a little Monopoly dollar event where people chose their priorities for the city. Number one was overwhelmingly housing, both affordability and availability of housing. And then she did a great job to kind of segue into this with the need for data and how this data can help drive decision-making and policy-making. So we all know we need more housing, and that's what this housing assessment is trying to find out. What's that magic number? How many doors, units do we actually need to build?
Questions on the housing study
He's pulling up a PowerPoint.
going on?
yes, Mayor, where is it?
Agenda, I'm just trying to get through as quickly as I can.
Okay, can y'all see that on the screen as well? Okay, so this shows our employment data within our service area, and we call it service area within 10-mile radius of city limits. So we look at that rather than looking at just city limits, because most of our major employers are just outside the city limit line. So this service area gives a more accurate depiction of the employees that we need to house. So the big takeaway here is that we have nearly 6,000 jobs within that service area. And more than 2,600 of those jobs are filled by outside workers. So those are people outside the service area coming into work. John, if you want it next. Oh, do I have it right here? Okay. So of course, some of the people living inside the service area are also employed outside. So this is showing that net inflow outflow. And overall, we're seeing just over 1,000 net job inflow. So that 1,027 number is the amount of workers that we're trying to find housing for.
So they commute into Dalhart for their jobs,
Correct.
but don't live here.
Correct. So this to me is the most striking data that we found of all rental properties, both apartments and detached houses. We found 44 people on rental wait lists. And at the time that we completed this housing study, just 2 rental vacancies. So you heard AJ talk about we're shy on renters. We don't have the rental units available. And then this just gives some context to residential units by ownership, showing that we're just over 2/3 owner occupied and just under 1/3 or just over 1/3 renter occupied. Again, this is just some context, what type of residential units we have. And then median home value and rent value. So here, what you're seeing is of course, how much the affordability of our houses and rental units. We also pulled these numbers for a group of 5 peer communities. So it was Dumas, Borger, Perryton, Childress, and Littlefield that we looked at. And we have slightly higher median income than our 5 peer communities, but we have significantly higher home prices and rent prices. So even though in general, our residents have more money, it's not making up for that gap in housing cost. And then big takeaways. So need to house just over 1,000. We get down to doors needed. That's just under 400 units that we need. We get to this number because our average housing size is 2.6, which is pretty standard. And then so owner occupied units needed between 200 and 250, and renter occupied units between 100 and 150. And then, of course, some context to that is we're looking at the service area. So some of that housing can fill in within that 10-mile radius. Not all of it has to come inside city limits, but the bulk of it, where we're driving development, would be coming inside city limits. And so EDC is looking at a few different projects to try to take a big chunk out of that. But it's a long-term project that we're going to have to keep in the forefront over the next several years. Is there any questions I can answer on that?
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Item number 12, let's discuss and or act upon the recommendation by the airport board to accept One Pioneer Drive LLC as a new primary FBO at Dalhart Municipal Airport, and the transfer of ground lease of FBO from Larson Aviation VLC Management, Inc. to One Pioneer Drive LLC. I want to go into executive session and discuss this before we act upon it. And so before we do, Emilio, is there anything you want to state or say?
No, sir.
Okay. Yes.
I would like to ask for legal counsel on proper form to going into executive session.
Sure. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I'd met most of y'all, so I'm Garrett. Yeah, so if we're gonna go into executive, I think there's one of two possibilities. We just need to be able to point to something under the local government code, one of the exceptions. I don't know exactly what you want to discuss. If we're talking about terms of the lease agreement that could potentially be detrimental to the city's position, if that's held in open, that's one reason we can go to executive session. Or if there are legal questions that need to be discussed, that would be another reason. If it's just a policy discussion or something like that, probably not. But if it's one of those first two, we can certainly go into executive for one of those.
Okay. I guess we could go under
Illegal.
the legal question.
Okay, that'd be 551.071. So if you have legal questions, I would say make a motion, just, or not a motion, but just announce that the council is going to go into executive under that provision of the local government code to discuss legal questions regarding this issue.
City Council will now convene into executive session under Texas Local Government Code 551.071 for real property discussion on transfer of ground lease FBO Municipal Airport. Time is 7:08 p.m.
No request and legal to attend.
Did you want?
Can you stick with us, legal?
Yes, sir. I think I got to click on a different link.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Council will now reconvene from executive session. Time is 8:01 PM. Item number 12, discuss and or act upon the recommendation by the airport board to accept One Pioneer Drive LLC as the new primary FBO at the Dalhart Municipal Airport.
I make a motion, we accept the recommendation of the airport board.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed by show of hands?
Hold on just a second.
So
Approved. I said, I made the motion that we approve the recommendation of the airport board, and he has put aye. I'm saying aye.
I said,
You said oppose.
so let's talk for that vote again. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed. Motion carries. Item number 13. Discuss and or act upon the recommendation by the airport board to accept Dalhart minimum standards for the airport with the changes listed in the packet.
Make a motion, we accept the recommendation of the airport board, Dalhart minimum standards.
Second,
So moved.
all in favor by show of hands. All opposed.
Four.
Gary, you
No.
or against that? Abstain. On what grounds?
Can you do that?
Yeah, you have to have a reason. If you abstain. So it's the minimum standard.
Against.
I'm abstaining because I owe the lease that it directly affects me.
So by show of hands again, all in favor? All opposed? Harper's abstaining.
Motion passed.
Motion carries. Item number 14, consider and act upon adopting resolution 2023-18.
I make a motion, we accept, adopt resolution 2023-18.
How are you wanting to split the votes? Are you wanting to split them, that's for Dalhart County, and then split the votes?
Yeah, we can split the votes evenly or all for just one.
Yeah.
I make a motion. Let it even.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 15, consider and act upon resolution 2023-19.
Make a motion, we adopt resolution 2023-19 with, equal split of the votes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 16. Discuss and or act upon adopting resolution 2023-20.
Make a motion, we adopt resolution 23-20 for the agreement of the ground lease. Real property.
All in favor by show of hands? All opposed? Motion denied. Item number 17, comments from city manager and department heads.
Brian, did you have something?
Oh, just real quick, got a phone call this morning. The new rescue truck said it should be ready by possibly the end of this week, beginning of next week. So we should have a rescue truck here pretty soon. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mario. Anything else?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much.
Mayor, we want some documents.